Welcome to Concordia University presents the Walrus Talks Disruption. My name is Shelley Ambrose. I'm the Executive Director of the Walrus Foundation and the publisher of the Walrus magazine. We're really happy to be here in the new and improved National Arts Center. This very storied institution is, as I'm sure you know, on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people here in the nation of Canada's capital city. And we're grateful to be in a place with such a rich history and such a bright future. The Walrus is all about the future. This optimistic project called the Walrus was started almost 15 years ago. In fact, our 15th anniversary is in 2018. And our goal is to create forums for conversations that matter to Canadians. One way we do that is by publishing the Walrus magazine. Who knows about the Walrus magazine? That's good because you're all holding one. So if you didn't put up your hand, I'm slightly concerned about you. Okay, you all have a Walrus magazine. Hands up and don't lie to me if you subscribe. These are my favorite people. And the rest of you, I have something to talk to you about at the end of the night. Okay? So hands up if you read it in print. Hands up if you read it on a screen, on your phone, somewhere else. Hands up if you do both. That's always interesting to me. Okay. Tonight is our 84th Walrus Talks. We started them 6 years ago. 84th, I know. I'm just getting older. So hands up if you've attended Walrus Talks before. I've done 84. That's good. Hands up if you're a newbie. Let's welcome the newbies. Hello, new people. So for those new to us, yes, we have a magazine called The Walrus. Yes, we have a series called The Walrus Talks. And of course, we have thewalrus.ca. But what we really are is a place. The Walrus is a place for you to come together, read, talk, listen, and share ideas for the future of our country and the world. And in all things Walrus, you will find well-told stories on everything from politics to culture, the environment, technology, so much more. Everything we do is meant to spark a conversation, either with us and you or with you and your community. The Walrus community, even the newbies, you are now a part of it. You are Walri. We know that's not a word, but we use it anyway. Walrus have a couple of common traits. One is that Walrus actually like to think about stuff, which is wow. And the other is that we all subscribe to the notion that your mind is like a parachute. It functions nominally better when open. So that is what a walrus is. The walrus is not left-wing or right-wing. You all know that the walrus actually has no wings. And we are an independent entity with no owners and no one point of view. We do have an educational mandate. That doesn't mean boring. We are governed by a board of directors, national board of directors. We have one of our board members, Jody Butts, here tonight. We also have a national advisory council, which lets me plumb the depths of some of the smartest people in our country. One of our advisory council members is one of our talkers tonight, Terry O'Reilly. And yes, Terry O'Reilly. And we also have an education review committee. The thing I'm going to tell you next, I never thought I would have to tell you, but our journalism is fact-based. Yes. I used to think journalism meant that, but that's not true anymore. We want you to know that we have live human fact-checkers. And we also train the future leaders of the media, and we have a unique editorial fellowship program designed to ensure the future of journalism, not just at the Walrus, but everywhere, is bright. Our journalism and our training programs are supported by circulation, advertising, sponsorship, charitable donations, events like these, and partnerships. And there is no way we could do the work that we do without partners like Concordia University. I think we have some Concordia alum here tonight. Where are you? Thank you and welcome. And I thank you for being with us. We've been working with Concordia for 3 or 4 years now as part of their Thinking Out Loud series. And since our first meeting with Concordia way back when, we were very impressed by their approach to education and the way they design their programs to prepare alumni for the real world and actually to be at the forefront of disruptions in all sectors. To tell us a bit more about that, please join me in welcoming Concordia's President and Vice Chancellor, our friend Alan Shepard.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Good to see everybody here again in Ottawa. A special welcome to the Concordia alums who are joining us this evening, and a special thanks to our partners at the Walrus, Shelley, David, and the whole team. They're really great to work with, and it's an important part of our outreach program in terms of bringing ideas to the communities. My sense of communities these days is that most of us in an era of Twitter and so forth, we're just starved for ideas. We're starved for like real conversation, long conversations in 140 characters and all that. So I'll just say a few words about Concordia. If you're not familiar with the university, it's located in the heart of Montreal. We have two campuses. It goes back to the 1890s when the Jesuits started Loyola College. And in 1926, Sir George Williams began its work in the basement of the YMCA. So you wonder, how is it that a collège classique in the Jesuit tradition might get married to an institution that was really for adult learners, for immigrants to Canada, for people who maybe had middling careers in high school and then at age 30 thought, or 40 or 50 thought, wow, I need a university education. So access to education has long been a hallmark of Concordia's traditions, and it still is today. And we're also, I would say, on the cutting edge of a number of academic disciplines in engineering, in the fine arts, in arts and sciences, and blanking on the fourth. Oh, engineering, arts and sciences, fine arts, and what's the last one? Business. How can I forget business? That's what happens when you let a humanities prof be president. Last time we were in Ottawa with the Walrus, I was one of the talkers, the future of the liberal arts, which is still bright, I gotta say. So it's a very difficult time to be a public institution anywhere in North America these days in an era of disruption. And at Concordia, we're doing our very best to make sure that we're preparing the next generation of students for a world that seems a little crazy, a little out of control, and highly unpredictable. And we're doing that through academic programs for sure, which try to keep pace with the rapid changes that we're all experiencing, but also with more non-traditional forms of learning, such as District 3, which is an incubation innovation center, started about 3 years ago, and many others that I could talk about, but Shelley's about to give me the hook. I want to say thank you again for joining us this evening. I hope you really enjoyed the talks that you're about to hear, and bonne soirée.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you again to everyone at Concordia for thinking out loud with us, which is what they do. I also want to thank our national partners at Shaw and at SSHRC. I think Ursula Goebel of SSHRC is here tonight, and with Amy and Aeroplan. They're all with us wherever we go, and we're very grateful. Now to our topic, disruption. Disruption means disturbance or problems that interrupt an event, activity, or process. And one could argue that that definition covers just about every aspect of our world today, every sector, media, world affairs, human migration, climate, population growth, technology, banking, justice, agriculture, natural resources, healthcare. Also disruptions in constructs like the patriarchy, party politics, feminism, broadcasting, the future of work, social media. Let's just talk about Twitter for a minute. And a whole lot more. So this Walrus Talks format is designed to bring you many perspectives, 8 actually, perspectives all at once. And our goal is that when you join us at the post-talks reception, which you're all invited to, that you have a little bit more to think about, because our goal is never to tell you what to think. Our goal is to think with you. And so the Walrus Talks is designed for people who understand that issues are complicated. Here's how it works. Each talker has 7 minutes. They know this. Each will come up and introduce themselves. We keep the lights on. You have a program in your hand. The speakers are listed in speaker order on the front. Their bios are on the back. We trust that you can follow along. They will say their name. You will hear them 8 in a row, and then afterwards you can meet them at the post-talks reception. So just before I let them get underway, I am, excuse me, going to thank them in advance. They're all volunteers, by the way. Thank you to President and CEO, Frontier College, Stephen Fowle, Perform Chair, Childhood Preventive Health and Data Science, and Associate Professor of Psychology, Concordia University's Jennifer McGrath. The writer, editor, and storyteller, Lisa Charlie Boy. The Concordia University Research Chair in Anxiety and Related Disorders and Professor of Psychology, Adam Radomski. Executive Vice President of Pivot Technology Solutions, Mike Flanagan. Founder and CEO, Dot Health, Huda Idris. Women's rights advocate, Julie S. Lalonde, and CBC radio host, Terry O'Reilly. Thank you all for coming. Let us begin.
Hello, I'm Jennifer McGrath. Think to yourself, when was the last time you had a good night's sleep and woke up feeling really, truly rested? What disrupts our ability to get a good night's sleep? If you're like most others, your schedule looks like this. You have competing demands for time, chaotic work schedules, and mounting deadlines. We live in a society that does not value sleep and often deems it to be an unproductive waste of time. Tonight, I'm here to talk to you about how sleep disruption is ruining your health. My interest in sleep and health came about in a roundabout way. My interest has long been interested in examining the links between stress, poverty, and child health. And I've been keen to understand what it is about stress and the stress of being poor that makes poorer people have poorer health. Now, as a good scientist, I'm trained to value the importance of doing experiments to delineate cause and effect. But no one's going to sign up for a study that randomizes them to either being stressed or being poor. So I turned to some colleagues that work with mice, and I was very intrigued to learn that they can use sleep disruption as a reliable way to elicit stress in these animals. And that really piqued my curiosity, and it led to the question of whether sleep disruption may be the mechanism by which stress and poverty get under the skin to adversely influence health. We spend 1/3 of our lives sleeping. Our sleep needs vary across the lifespan. How much sleep do you need? Well, school-age children need 9 to 11 hours each night, teens about 8 to 10 hours, and adults should sleep 7 to 9 hours. All organisms sleep. Scientists recently found compelling evidence that you don't even need a brain to sleep. Jellyfish are now the simplest animals known to sleep, and this tantalizing discovery is just the sort of thing that keeps inquiring minds of scientists up at night. So why do we need to sleep? Well, sleep affects how you look, how you feel, how you perform on a daily basis. And we need a night of uninterrupted sleep to leave our bodies and our minds feeling rejuvenated. Throughout the night, our sleep architecture cycles through a pattern of alternating REM and non-REM sleep. And as we sleep, our brains recharge, our memory is consolidated. During deep restorative sleep, it's the time for tissue growth and muscle repair. This year's Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded to the 3 scientists who discovered the inner workings of the biological clock that helps us anticipate and adapt to the regular rhythm of the day. For most people, our daily biological clock is 24.2 hours. Free-running experiments in caves with no light cues demonstrate that we have a natural tendency to go to bed 12 minutes later each night. This means that after 5 nights, we would go to bed 1 hour later. To keep our body aligned with the world around us, we entrain our circadian rhythm using light cues. And this entrainment allows our daily biological rhythms to remain synchronized. Rhythmicity is key. Imagine an orchestra. The sounds of musical instruments come together for a beautiful symphony. When the timing of the sounds are out of rhythm, dysynchrony happens. And the same thing happens when our body's circadian rhythms are disrupted and become misaligned. Researchers have known for some time that short sleep duration, or sleeping too few hours, is bad for health. But new evidence suggests the link is less about the amount of sleep and more about the quality and the timing of sleep. Disrupted circadian rhythms lead to heart attacks, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, some cancers, and even death. In childhood, sleep disruptions are linked to obesity, inflammation, and learning problems. As a society, most of us are not sleeping within our normal sleep window. Our body no longer receives reliable cues to sync our internal clocks to the external environment. Our 24/7 society is disrupting our circadian clock and making our brains lose rhythm, leading to social jet lag. Curiously, social jet lag is most pronounced during adolescence. More than half of adolescents age 15 and older go to bed after 1 a.m. And to compensate for the sleep debt accumulated over the school week, they sleep in on the weekends. Consider, if a teen goes to bed at 1 a.m. on Friday and sleeps until 11 a.m. the next day on Saturday, this causes a phase delay in their circadian rhythm. Shifting back to an earlier wake time for school on Monday morning requires several days before their circadian rhythm realigns. This shift in sleep is like traveling across several time zones every weekend. Delayed phase shift during adolescence has been consistently observed across mammals, from mice to monkeys, and these sleep changes are partly attributed to puberty, but they're exacerbated by modern society. We are sleeping less than previous generations. In the last 4 decades, we have lost 25% of precious sleep time. Our activity no longer coincides with daylight hours. Meal times are later, and we are constantly exposed to bright light. Most teenagers and adults have television or computer or other technology in their bedroom. Bedrooms are glowing in the blue light from smartphones and tablets. Nighttime exposure to blue light disrupts our sleep and misaligns our circadian rhythm. Noise disturbances near your home not only reduce the value of your property, but they also interfere with your sleep. Other disruptors include exposure to artificial light, stress, consumption to caffeine, and irregular sleep patterns. Thus, our neighborhoods and our social environment get into our bedrooms and into our heads at night, and they lead to microarousals or intrusions in our sleep. Today, gadgets and wearable technology make it possible for us to be aware of and monitor our sleep disruptions. Every vertical line that's depicted here indicates a microarousal or awakening during the night. Repeated nights of interrupted, fragmented sleep have a cumulative impact leading to sleep debt. It's possible to estimate the sleep debt of society. The Van Winkle sleep debt clock features a running tabulation of the sleep debt accrued by Americans. It quantifies the rest deficit, or the difference between the amount of sleep people should be getting and the hours that are actually being slept. Sleep disturbances also have a larger economic impact to society. The RAND Institute investigated 5 OECD countries and calculated the economic costs of insufficient sleep at the population level, attributable to driving accidents, work productivity lost, and days lost per year. The economic cost is $21.4 billion per year in Canada alone. Small changes to sleep could have a big impact on our economy. Consider increasing quality sleep by 1 hour per day could add $12 billion to the Canadian economy. How can we offset sleep disruptions and promote better quality sleep? For youth, there are 3 recommendations. First, have consistent bedtimes and wake times, going to bed and waking up at the same time on school days and weekends. Second, get electronics out of the bedroom. Third, go to bed by 9 p.m. For teenagers, there's also a policy recommendation for later school start times. These recommendations are largely consistent for you. If sleep takes up a third of our lives, it's essential to prioritize sleep, as it plays a direct role in how full and energetic and successful the other 2/3 of our lives can be. So I leave you tonight with a challenge. What can you do to decrease disruptions and increase your quality sleep by 1 hour each day? Thank you.
Well, good evening, my fellow Walrus. I learned a new word tonight. I'm Stephen Fall with Frontier College. I want to thank the Walrus Foundation in Concordia for the opportunity to be here tonight. Let me just take the first of my 7 minutes to talk a little about the issue we deal with. Frontier College is not a bricks and mortar school, but rather we are a national literacy organization. We were established in 1899 on the belief that literacy is a right. We work with community-based agencies across the country to provide help to people with literacy and numeracy. Last year, we reached about 30,000 children, youth, and adults in 160 different communities throughout Canada. Literacy is a much bigger problem than many people realize. It's measured on a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being the highest. A recent study revealed that almost half of Canadians have literacy scores below level 3, and nearly 1 in 5 Canadians are at or below level 1. That's a serious problem. So why does this matter? A person's literacy skills have an enormous impact on their quality of life. TD Economics has said, if you really want to elevate the standard of living in Canada, address literacy. Comparatively speaking, someone with low literacy has fewer choices when it comes to jobs, education, and housing, is more likely to interact with the criminal justice system, will have a more difficult time doing things that many people take for granted, such as driving, shopping, voting. And this might surprise you, is generally 1.5 to 3 times more likely to have an adverse health outcome. People with low literacy aren't as likely to participate in disease screening and prevention practices. They're more likely to have trouble following written directions, such as prescriptions, pre-test procedures, special diets, etc. So how does this all interact with technology? Well, the point I want to make tonight is that as much as I, and I suspect many of you, embrace technology, we need to be cautious when we expect individuals to interact with it. It's one thing if we have 2 different professionals who are interacting with tech on someone else's behalf. For example, let's talk about healthcare. We could have a healthcare practitioner dealing with another healthcare practitioner with technology being a common link. That's terrific. But for the reasons I've just outlined, when we expect individuals to interact with the tech, we need to be careful because we run the risk of leaving people behind, especially those with low literacy. Now, this is important in many disciplines, but it's really critical when it comes to healthcare, because what we don't want to create is a situation where there's a barrier, if you will, between human care provider and human patient. We have lots of people who come to us at Frontier College who say, I need to improve my digital literacy. And so we're happy to work with them. But what we realize is they're really not talking about having trouble with one operating system over another. At the end of the day, they have trouble reading, and no different operating system will really solve that. As a related note, an issue I won't explore too much tonight is that sometimes we look to technology to solve distances. We need to remember that not everyone has equal access to things like broadband. Last year, there were still 1 million Canadians who didn't have access to broadband technology. So we need to be cautious about seeing that as a solution. I want to share a personal story with you that hopefully collects some of these items. A few years ago, my wife had a significant health issue. And I'm happy to say she's in excellent health today. But during a course of treatment, they gave us reams of paper to look through, and we looked through it and put our heads together, and most of it was understandable, and occasionally we'd look at each other and say, what do you suppose they meant by that? At any rate, some of this information was quite critical. Some of it was, well, if these things happen in this order, well, you need to take this particular pill. On another occasion, it would be, okay, well, you're going to have this test. So these are the things you need to do 24 hours and 12 hours ahead. And then there was this other category, which was, if these things happen, you need to get to the ER right away. Well, I'm sorry to say these things happened. And we did read this, and we said, whoa, we need to get right to the ER. And we did. Successful conclusion to that story. And I wonder, what if we were people who didn't have very good literacy? What if we didn't know that that was the appropriate course? And then thinking even further about technology, are there ways that tech might have helped that situation? There probably are, but there may also be ways where technology might have hindered that. So it's a cautionary tale. I've been taking a look at a book recently called Disruptive Fixation. It's subtitled School Reform in the Pitfalls of Techno-Idealism. Now, the author reviews the experience of a school in the US which was going to be completely redesigned for the 21st century. It was going to be teaching via technology. Now, I'm not qualified to go into the whole explanation of that experience, but I will provide the summary that I've gleaned from reading the book so far, is that the school that was going to solve education issues through technology ran into a few problems along the way. And through the course of their experience, they ended up reverting ever closer to the status quo, which is not to say people shouldn't try to make improvements and not to say we shouldn't use technology, only that it's a process and it requires careful consideration and we need to be prepared for trial and error. The author notes that there are a number of technological advances over time that have come with a promise. The internet, you'll be happy to know, is a tool to bring people together. Now I say that with a bit of a smile, simply because I read Twitter, and I'm not so sure I'm being brought together with my fellow human through Twitter. Before that, electronic media would create an harmonious global village. Even further in the past, the printing press would create a new democratic world. Now, not to say that there isn't truth in some of these things, but they're not a panacea. I'll conclude by noting that any time technology interrupts the status quo, there are two pretty distinct views. There's the tremendously optimistic and the tremendously cynical. Traditionally, I lean more toward being optimistic, but I will say on this issue, particularly technology, as it applies to some of the things we're talking about, I'm cautious. I'm cautious about viewing it as an answer to complicated questions, and I'm concerned that for the reasons I've outlined, if we're not careful, we risk leaving people behind. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Charlie Boy. I'm going to disrupt the narrative today a little bit by getting things a little personal. So I'm going to tell you about my mom. She came from the States and she came up to Canada as a missionary. She went to the interior of BC where she met my father. Her mission wasn't to fall in love, but that is exactly what happened. She said once she saw my dad riding bareback on a horse, she was done. So they got married shortly after, and then my father became chief. However, my father went to residential school when he was young, and as many of you in the room know, that residential school was a very dark chapter in our history. And although I don't know my father's personal story and his personal experience there, we do know that many young children really had terrible experiences that no child should ever have to face. And when I was 4 years old, my father committed suicide. And I remember being at the cemetery during the funeral and trying to skip around because I really knew all of the adults were watching me and they wanted to make sure that I was okay and that somehow me skipping around would make everybody else okay. Because my mom wasn't from the reserve, we had to move shortly after that, and we moved to the suburbs of Vancouver, to the Bible Belt, actually, of Canada. And it was, once we moved there, there was a total loss of culture for myself. My mom, she stopped talking about my dad, and I was disconnected from my culture pretty much from that point forward. And I didn't really have a strong desire to want to connect to my culture because all of the representations that I saw in mainstream media and pop culture and movies and everything that surrounded me only reinforced negative stereotypes to me. And I felt very confused about my identity then, and I felt a little lost. But eventually, I found my tribe. I started reading Vogue magazine when I was 10, and I fell in love with it. I loved all the fashion and all the glamour and how exciting it was, and eventually I moved to Toronto to study fashion. And I started being able to go to fashion shows and galas, and I felt like I was finally living the life that I was dreaming about when I was a kid stuck in the suburbs. And there was another magazine that came across my path at that time, and it was called Spirit magazine, and it's a Native arts and culture magazine. And in that magazine, I opened the pages and I saw Indigenous artists, authors, and all of these amazing Indigenous people that I never knew about. It was a whole new world that was opened up to me through the pages of that magazine. And it really changed the way that I thought about Indigenous people, and it really started started me on the path of beginning to connect to my culture. I was downtown at a film festival, Imaginative Film Festival, if anybody knows that, Indigenous Film Festival. And I met my cousin who invited me to a ceremony back in BC in our traditional territory. And I was really excited to go because it seemed like the ultimate way to connect with culture is a ceremony. And so I was super stoked, but it was in Nehemiah Valley, really far, very remote. And it took us 3 hours, and we had to go through a logging road to be able to get to the ceremony site. And as we were walking in, there was the local chief at the front who asked us, as we were entering, there's about 20 of us, to make a promise that, and an intent with our ceremony that we would be protecting the sacred waters that were right next to us. Fish Lake was the lake right next to us, and Silcoaching people have been defending the rights to that lake and to the water to preserve the traditional territory since the Caribou Gold Rush, and defending through war, whether that be war back in the day, physical war, or in the courtrooms today. And it was after the experience of the ceremony in the morning when I was standing by Fish Lake, and I just felt this immense feeling of peace that I just never have ever known before. And although I felt a bit confused about that promise that I had to make to that chief, I felt that it was the right thing to do. Now, right after that, after being back in the bush, I was headed to Italy, of course, naturally. My boyfriend at the time was a hedge fund manager, and there was a group of people that were that were his colleagues that were meeting in Lake Como. And I was feeling really nervous about this experience because it was a bunch of people I didn't know. And the first night we were walking towards the dining room hall, and there was a man standing outside with a big glass bowl, and he wanted us each to take a paper that corresponded with the table that we were supposed to sit at. So we're being split up, and I was terrified because I didn't know anyone. I knew I was going to be one of the youngest people there, and probably one of the few with brown skin. I was a little nervous. After I sat down, though, there was a woman just a couple seats away from me who started talking about BC. And then I heard her say Dene. And then I heard her say Nehemiah Valley. And I just was so excited because I was like, wow, okay, I've got something to talk about here. I was just in Nehemiah Valley just like a few days before camping. So I interrupted the conversation, and the two women that were beside her were kind of like, you were camping? Weird. But I continued the conversation, and she told me that when she was in her 20s, she used to be a nurse in the interior of BC to these remote reserves. And so we got having a conversation. I told her that I'm from one of them. I told her who my father was and my mother. And she said that she used to know my father and that he was just a really kind and really generous man. And that she was actually my nurse when I was a baby. And it was so incredible because here I was in this far place that was in a place that felt so foreign to me, and I felt so disconnected from, and I found that moment of connection. And that moment of connection really resonated with me just like it did after the ceremony. And that was the point in my life where I realized that I really needed to disrupt my own narrative and to, instead of living a life that was devoted to creating a beautiful Instagram stream, that I wanted to live a life that was connected to culture and community at its core. Thank you.
Bonsoir, good evening. I'm Adam Radomski. And the topic that I thought I would talk with you about this evening is why I haven't really prepared for this talk. That is actually true. I haven't written any notes. I haven't practiced. I haven't rehearsed. I don't have any PowerPoint slides. And it felt like there was so many wonderful offers of support from both the Walrus and from Concordia that I declined. Not because I'm lazy. I'm going to explain to you why. So I study anxiety disorders and related problems, and one of the main things that we focus on is obsessive compulsive disorder. Or OCD. OCD is surprisingly common. It affects about 2% of Canadians. That's a large handful of people in this room. And it can be incredibly disabling. The World Health Organization about 15 years ago listed it among the top 10 causes of disability worldwide. It disrupts lives, it ruins lives. It's horrible, and it is sometimes called the doubting disease. Now that's actually a terrible name because it's not a disease, it's a mental disorder, it's not contagious, you can't catch it. But the doubting piece is very interesting. The most common symptoms of OCD are compulsive checking, where people repeatedly go back and verify again and again and again that things are okay. So for example, checking to make sure that your door is locked, and my guess is a lot of you might check perhaps to see if your passport is with you on your way to the airport, maybe more than once. You might check to see that your alarm is set to the right time if you've got an early morning appointment. Imagine living that all day, every day, being terrified that you're just on the cusp of something awful happening. The other most common symptom of OCD is compulsive washing or cleaning. So these are people who wash usually their hands, but also other body parts or parts of their home over and over and over again. It can be so severe that people can wash the skin off their hands and it becomes dry and cracked, and people will use things like bleach and scalding hot water. It's a terrible problem. We've become very interested in doubt because one of the early theories of OCD was that the reason people are doing these things must be that there's something wrong with their memory. And in fact, a million years ago, my master's thesis examined memory in OCD, and what we found was that people with OCD actually have an amazingly good memory. Their memory is superior for particular types of information compared to you and me. So it's not memory accuracy that drives the problem. It's not what people are remembering. And so the mystery sort of continued for a while until a group in the Netherlands, actually based in Maastricht, did the most elegant study where they got undergraduate students, so these were people without OCD, and they trained them to check on a computer. And I'll take you through, I'm big on methodology, so I'll take you through the design so you can understand what they did. They trained these students with a mouse to turn on, turn off, and check the knobs on the screen of what looked like a gas stove, and they also trained them to turn on and off some dimmer switches for some light bulbs. And they had them all check, for example, please turn on knobs 1, 3, and 5, please turn them off, now check them. Everyone was given a memory test, so which knobs did you just check? And they were also asked a series of questions about their confidence in memory. So how confident are you that those are the knobs you just checked? How vivid is your memory for that? And other questions like that. Excuse me, participants were then randomly assigned to either do 20 additional trials of checking on the stove or on the light bulbs. And at the very end of that study, everybody checked the stove and got one final time, excuse me, and then got those same questions. And what they found was amazing. Memory accuracy was solid all the way through. Everybody could remember exactly which knobs they checked at the beginning and at the end. But for the people who checked the stove all the way through that study, their memory confidence fell dramatically. So did the vividness in their memory. So did the detail in their memory. The people who checked the light bulbs in between the two stove checks, well, their memory confidence was near perfect. We took this work to my lab at Concordia, and we replicated the study using a real stove because we thought, well, maybe the idea that might actually be dangerous could make a difference. We found exactly the same thing. The study's been replicated with mental checking. So check it in your mind. Find the same thing. The more you check, the less sure you are. And that's very interesting because when you ask people with OCD, and even the rest of us, why is it that you're checking that? Most people say, well, I really want to be sure. I want to be confident. But what we've found again and again and again in studies that have now been replicated in about 6 different countries, both in student populations, which is important because if you can get a student to look like they have OCD, you're really finding yourself onto a process that might matter in therapy, in treatment. You might find a process that might help you to understand why do some people have this problem and some people not. Checking disrupts your confidence. Now, at this point, normally, if I had 7 hours, I would tell you about how we can use that in therapy. And in fact, we are changing lives, and it's remarkable to be able to use science to drive the clinical work that we do with patients and clients. But instead, what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about what I've been thinking might come next. That's the idea that if the more you check, the less sure you become. What happens when you check for years? Maybe that disrupts self-confidence. Maybe someone who's spending so much of their time trying to be sure about something, and all they're finding is that they become less and less sure, really might start to lead them to question whether they're good enough, whether they're capable, whether they're able. And it's no surprise that about 60% of people with OCD also meet the diagnostic criteria for depression. So if the more you check, the less sure you are, then why didn't I prepare for this talk? Well, practice is good. You know, practice makes perfect. And if someone had asked me to talk about perhaps one of the other fascinating topics we're getting to hear about this evening, I certainly would have needed to write it down and memorize it or learn it or practice it. But what I've been talking about is the work that I've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years, and I think I know that reasonably well. I will leave it up to you to determine whether or not this was worth listening to. But one of my goals was that I wanted to feel confident about the things that I was speaking of this evening. I wanted you to feel confident about the role of repetition and confidence and doubt and memory and anxiety, which of course plays into that. I want you to be more confident. So if you're not sure about how well you can manage something, practice it until you get good at it. But once you're pretty sure of how good you are, stop practicing. You don't need to overdo it. You'll be more confident as a result. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Flanagan, and I own and manage two key areas for Pivot Technology Solutions. One we call the Integrated Services Portfolio, and the other one we call the Innovation Factory. And I'm going to talk to those. And I'm going to talk to disruption in IT and in business. So in 1880, Eastman Kodak was founded. And for 120 years, it was a healthy company. It grew its revenues to about $11 billion. A few years later, the revenues were less than $1 billion because it was disrupted. They were in the photograph industry, and digital cameras came out. And by the way, digital cameras got disrupted by the infamous smartphone. Blockbuster, in its heyday, had 9,000 retail stores and was healthy. And guess who disrupted them? A mail order company, because they were in the VHS, DVD rental business. A mail order company by the name of Netflix disrupted them. And by the way, Netflix disrupted itself by doing video streaming. June 2016, Chuck Robbins, Cisco CEO, he announced that they've begun a new journey. They are going to morph into a software company. In my industry, that is huge, because they are a hardware behemoth, $48 billion worth of revenue. And we had to take that seriously because it affects where we're going to go. So we decided that we would change directions, and we set up this innovation factory. So in my role, I am fortunate to meet with a lot of leaders, CTOs, CIOs, business leaders, even chief innovation officers. And I always ask, what are your top 2 or 3? And I've been keeping this since 2005, by the way. And I always get 2 or 3 of what you're going to see. First and foremost, reduce cost. We need to reduce our costs. And I change that to increase value, because when you reduce cost and you bring your budget down, you have a hard time getting that back. The second is improve user experience, or what we call UX. One of the clients I deal with and have worked with for many years, his business has 65,000 associates. And he said, you know what, Mike, I don't have 2, I have 1. I want 65,000 smiles. Because when I go in the elevator, it's not the help desk, it's the helpless desk. I need to fix that. The next is IT-driven business alignment. IT has always had a hard time aligning with the business. Next is increase speed to market. How do you take a solution and service and bring it to market faster? Because outside of IT, outside of the business, it's happening much faster than they can deliver. And last but not least, leap to next-gen technology. When we go into an RFP, and that's a bid response, one of the things that I always hear from the leaders is, Mike, we don't want to be iterative. We don't want to take steps to get to the next phase. We want to leap into the next gen of technology. So keep these 5 things in mind for the next couple slides. So IT is standing there going like this. There are 2 forces that are really pressuring them. One is called consumerization. Another one is this 4th revolution era, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So what if, when I sit with these leaders, and by the way, I have met in the past 3 years with over 150 of them. And I love it because I get so much feedback and they make me smarter. What if you had your own quadrant? Your digital transformation quadrant, how would that look? So if you take those 5 things that I mentioned earlier and use that as your litmus test, plus you add security because that's kind of big in our space, and you use that to validate where you are and where you want to go, and you built this quadrant where if you go up the left side, what happens is as you get towards the top, what you're doing is you're improving experience. And down the right side, if you go down the right side, you're evolving and you're taking advantage of technology and you're innovating. And you got 4 sections. You have what is called BAU, business as usual. That's kind of your starting point. You have this focus section where you're focused on the end user and you're bringing better value. You have this advancing section where you're taking advantage of technology, and then you have this leading. Whatever you put your things in there. And as you see, up top, you'll see the consumerization. That's the pressure. And with consumerization, if the way to describe that is 2007, the iPhone came out. In 2010, the iPad came out. And with all the applications and all the capability and the things like Facebook, your experience at home with technology was much more powerful. Prior to that, you would get better tech at work. So IT really started seeing the pressure. Then on the right side, what you see is the revolution, and you see cyber-physical systems. It went from STEAM to cyber-physical systems. And that's really talking to cloud. It's talking to autonomics, predictive fixing, taking advantage of those technologies which are very disruptive in our space. So you got that pulling IT, and then you got consumerization pressure in IT. So when you look at the first quadrant, it's kind of your starting point. It's business as usual, and I have my device standards. I got my standard data center. And then how do I evolve that? So if I'm the guy that owns that insurance company's infrastructure and want to change the user experience, I'm going to focus up in the quadrant up top, and I'm going to look at persona-based model and BYO. I'm going to look at portals and launch them to change how you do business and your experience when you basically interact with IT. If I'm one of the ones that want to drive cost out, I'm coming down to the right and doing some automation, leveraging technology that either optimizes my processes or reduces or takes out work. And if I really want to evolve and get advanced, I'm going to go up top right, northeast. And what I'm going to do is leverage other technologies with processes. And you can see, you'll see things like YAP, your own password. When I walk up to my computer, I automatically log on. Things like that I bring to the business, bring services that really change how people feel. I'm really trying to drive it. So whatever these things are for you, you have to define them. But the key is to take the list that you see to the, I guess, your left, and you qualify them, because you can't do it all. This is a short list of what it really looks like. It could be 100. Our industry is so disruptive, you can't keep up. So you have to stay focused. So one of the things that one of the clients told me, we're in a conversation, and he said, we started talking about our kids for some reason, and he said this, and it stuck with me. You know what I told my son is, if you don't have a goal and a plan, you're wandering. In this space, and you're dealing with disruption, and you're trying to evolve your technology, if you don't have a framework and an execution engine, by the way, we have one we call Center of Excellence Program, this Innovation Factory, and we developed a whole framework. You're truly, in reality, you're wandering. And you're being hopeful that you can move your company forward. And we all know, in reality, in IT, hope is really not a strategy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Huda Idris. When was the last time you went to a library? My guess is that you go to the library less often than the people who didn't have the world's information at their fingertips. When we think about the internet, one important piece of it is a search engine. When you can just search through a couple of terms and finish your research paper, maybe you're trying to learn more about a new subject, you suddenly start to understand why when data is just sitting around in a library or in a single book, it's not as useful as when it's brought right to you, right when you need it. When search engines came about, they didn't magically produce new information. Alta Vista didn't hire a bunch of content producers to make you suddenly smarter. Yahoo, maybe they did later on, but initially didn't hire a bunch of writers so they could produce content for you so that you could learn. What they were really doing is leveraging all the existing information that we have and giving it to the individual. Search engines augmented the human ability to access information and made us faster at anything that we were doing. Now, when I say the word disruption, I'll bet at least some of your minds are going to things like holograms and hovercrafts, or really anything from the Jetsons. We often equate disruption with futurism or invention. But sometimes, and I would argue in some of the most important areas, disruption is actually quiet. It's thinking about areas in a different way. Google, everyone's favorite search engine, beat out its competitors by looking at how it was presenting information. It beat out its biggest competitor when it comes to email, Hotmail at the time, by just offering people more space. Google wasn't actually inventing anything. They were, for all intents and purposes, a means to an end. Now I'm going to get to the part that I'm really excited about. I play in the world of healthcare. And healthcare is a prickly issue, especially in Canada. You know, it's our favorite thing to rub in all the Americans' faces, that we have free healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also a system that is creaking at the wheels. It's unsustainable. We don't know why it keeps us waiting for months to get into a simple surgery. We don't know why we don't get diagnosed properly the first time. But if you think about this complex, publicly funded infrastructure, and individuals like you and me going through it, what needs to be perfect is when we're passed from one agent to the next. So when communication happens, maybe your family doctor is referring you to a specialist. Maybe that specialist is referring you to a surgeon. And that communication, today in 2017, happens via the very reliable fax machine. In fact, I would venture to say that the healthcare industry is keeping the fax industry alive. Often, the fix that is proposed when it comes to the broken healthcare system is to put in more frontline workers. Why don't we just add doctors and nurses? Can't get into surgery fast enough? Great, I'll just hire more surgeons. But what if we dug deeper than that? What if the issue isn't we don't have enough resources, the issue is we're misusing and misallocating the resources that we do have? So we don't necessarily have to spend billions of dollars either hiring more people or trying to come up with some new infrastructure to usher healthcare into the 21st century. A simple way to make healthcare sustainable and equitable to all of us is to leverage something that lots of industries have leveraged to date: data. The data we capture about our own healths doubles in amount every single year. We are capturing more digital health data about ourselves than ever before. But where does this data live? I want to talk about how we're actually living through a digital health inflection point right now. If you think about it, every hospital you've been to, every executive care clinic you belong to, every walk-in clinic you've been to, All of them are capturing data on you. They're capturing maybe just your vitals. Maybe some of them are running blood tests. Maybe they're doing some imaging. But they're capturing all this data about you. And it's powerful stuff. It's not just stuff you've given them and filling out all those boring forms at the beginning. It's about whether your cholesterol tends to trend upwards. It's important information, but it's invisible to you. All of that information, really powerful, sits separately in all these different silos and all the different clinics and healthcare practitioners you've ever been to. What if it didn't have to live separately? What if we could harness the power of all of your health data in one go? We often do this when we travel. So if you were to travel, I'm guessing you're probably going to take your passport. You want to get in and out of places. You're probably going to carry some traveler's checks just in the event that you need more cash. But what if you got into a health episode? What if you were on vacation in Thailand and, heavens forbid, something went wrong? I guarantee you the Thai ER doctor won't know what you're fatally allergic to. So it's so amazing that we take such pains to put together all of our passports and travel documents and traveler's checks. But when it comes to our health, we travel completely blind. What if you had access to all of your own health data? Today, you have access to your bank account on your phone. Heck, you can even look at the last 2 years of all your coffee orders on Starbucks. You have that right at your fingertips. But most of you probably don't know what your blood group is. Most of you probably don't remember the last time you got your tetanus shot. And that's worrying. Now let's take it a step further. Say we've powered every individual with access to their own information. What if we group that together? Search engines, by looking at trends of what people are searching for, can tell us what the world is thinking. If you think about harnessing the power of the masses and their health data, if we could tap into that, what if we could actually follow epidemics in real time? What if we could instantaneously place people in clinical trials instead of waiting months to get there? I think when we tap into this really powerful data of healthcare of the masses, we can actually see how the world is feeling. Thank you very much.
Good evening, bonsoir. My name is Julie S. Lalonde, and like a really good lapsed Catholic, I want to start with a confession. If you invite me to your party, I'm gonna make it weird. That's just like a thing. I don't do it on purpose, it's not intentional, but this is usually what happens. So someone invites me somewhere where there's some level of chit-chat and networking and chatting, and folks talk about what they do for a living. Oh, I work in IT, I'm a dentist, I'm an accountant. And then folks turn to me and I say, oh yeah, I work to end male violence against women. And there's a pause. And then people suddenly need to get a drink. They're feeling, oh, it's warm in here, I gotta go outside, get some air or something. And I'm like, oh, it was really, really nice to meet you. Also, your Halloween costume is really racist, but it was super nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, I am that person at your party. And the reason why I'm that person at your party is because folks don't like to talk about the reality of violence against women. And I connect with colleagues from around the world, and they will tell you, I am the buzzkill at my parties also, so it's a universal reality. But there is a Canadian dynamic to that conversation, which is when people hear that I do work on violence against women, they ask me, oh, where? Because they assume I'm doing that work internationally. Because as Canadians, we believe that violence against women happens elsewhere. We believe that you know how those people are in their culture, and it's such a shame. Here's some money, go donate, right? That's what makes us feel comfortable. So when I tell you, and I tell people at parties, that I work to end male violence against women in a Canadian context, I am blowing up an expectation that people have. Because on the surface, gender equality is a core value that people really love and hold on to quite tight. And I think we've seen this in Canada since Ivanka's dad got elected, and we're feeling very smug about gender equality in Canada. So when you're a woman, a lady who's also a feminist, then people think you're just taking it too far. In Canada, we have a cool sock-wearing, feminist-identified prime minister, so we good. You can just like pack it in. We're like totally fine. And me not wanting to pack it in means I'm taking it too far. I'm obviously super ungrateful, first of all, like you could live elsewhere, but you live here, you should be grateful. And therefore, the next conclusion is I just hate men. I hate men and I'm super bitter and cynical about it, and that's why I'm just grinding against a gear that doesn't need to be grinded against anymore because we good in Canada. For the record, I don't hate men, but I really wish they would stop sending me hate mail. That's like all I ask. That's like all I ask. Just like bare minimum, thank you. That's a lot to ask people, just so you know. I'm still working on that. So when I'm told to be grateful that I live in Canada, I have to be the person that reminds folks that currently, in 2017, 1 in 3 women in this country will experience sexual violence in their lifetime. And every 6 days in Canada, a woman is murdered by a current or former partner. I'm not gonna sit around and feel grateful about that. We have a lot of work left to do. And because people think my job is to be a buzzkill, which I joke about because in many cases it is. People are, like I said, I'm like, womp womp, like I'm that person. I will show up and I will be that person. And that's fine. But really, honestly, my job is to call out bullshit. That's what I do. I'm an expert bullshit caller. Because in Canada, we have learned that being explicitly sexist is not a very good polite thing to do, right? So saying, for example, women are just asking to be raped, faux pas. However, saying, it's just common sense that women shouldn't drink around men, sorry, common sense. That's how we say it. To say curfews and chaperones are mandatory for women, no one would politely say that in Canada. But if there's a predator on the loose, it's common sense that women should stay indoors, not go outside late at night, and to travel in pairs. It is rude in Canada to say that women shouldn't take public transit. However, when women talk about their experiences of transit and harassment that happens, we're told there's creepers on the bus, that's what the bus is, right? So, right, we've all heard it. So, that is why I am framed as the person who's constantly disrupting what makes people feel comfortable. I don't purposely go out of my way to make people uncomfortable. I actually like having conversations with people where they're nice to me and we talk about things that are nice and pleasant. But I can't deny the reality standing in front of me, and it's my job to challenge the subtext in what we hear. Challenging the idea that it is common sense that women shouldn't be safe when drinking around men is not only offensive to women, but it also means you have a very low opinion of men. And I'm going to reframe that and throw that back at you and see how that makes you feel when you frame it in that way. So it's interesting to me that I'm constantly told to be grateful, and then I'm also framed as cranky, kind of bitter, a little bit cynical. And in many ways I am. But what folks need to understand is that fundamentally, if you dedicate your life to ending violence against women, if you are a feminist, and let's be honest, if you're a woman who's a feminist, because we love male feminists, like we love them, like so much, like oh my God, the most amount. There's a reason why there's a joke, which is the feminist man walked into a bar. Why? Because it was set so low. Like that's how we live. I'm just saying, it needed to be said. So, when you're a lady who cares about women's issues, people assume that you're the person finding the negativity in everything. But in fact, feminism is inherently hopeful. By working to end violence against women, I am inherently optimistic that a better world is possible, that not all men are predators in waiting, that women do have strength and resilience to do great things in the world. I think the world can change. You don't. But I'm the disruptor, I'm the cranky one. And we have to flip that around and look at that for what it is. Because I haven't been doing this work for very long, and I haven't made a lot of friends, I'll be honest with you. People see me come into meetings and they're just like, oh, damn it. And I'm like, yes, I am here to be that. I'm like the Hermione of feminism, just gonna throw my hand up like every time, just like challenging what you're saying. Just doing it. But I haven't been doing this work for very long, and my being the Hermione of feminism has worked. So I fought Carleton University to get a sexual assault center, and Carleton University has a sexual assault center. I challenged the fact that we didn't have nurses that were performing rape kits. We didn't have enough nurses performing rape kits at Ottawa, and we do now. I fought for many years our public transit authority to say, why do we treat it as obvious that creepers are allowed on the bus and I'm not? I pay the same fare. Either I pay less or you get rid of the creepers. That's just what's up, right? And that is just me with one person doing my little piece. And so I'm constantly coming back to this idea of what if there was a little Hermione Granger feminist in every space? If we all took the time to reframe and throw back at people these common sense notions of gratitude and gender equality and all these things, look at how much we could accomplish. A lot. And so for me, the secret to doing this work is hope and courage and tenacity. I'm not going to write, be tenacious, because it's long and it's hard, but being hopeful and reframing the fact that you are constantly seen as the person bringing everybody down. But in fact, you're the only person in that room that thinks that a better world is possible. Because I think that men can do better. I know they can because I've seen it happen. And I think and know that young girls have the right to live in this country as free as young men. So for me, I want to ask you if you're okay to disrupt spaces in which you are told to shut up about it because it's awkward. It is awkward. I get that. That's my life, right? But I'm fine. You'll be fine too, right? And recognizing that, yes, being disruptive is not fun, it's not easy, it doesn't pay well or at all. Your inbox will be the stuff of nightmares. But if we are in every single space, you're not going to be the only person saying those things. You're setting a new norm in those spaces. And so I'm asking you to join me. Let's ruin some dinner parties. Let's ruin people's Halloween costumes. Let's just do it. Let's just lean into it. Because I'm telling you, if we all do this work, that won't be seen as disruptive anymore. We'll be creating the new norm. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Terry O'Reilly, and I'm wearing subscription underwear. So for those of you who just said, what did he say? You heard right. You can now subscribe to online companies who will send you underwear every month. Yes, you can become an underwear subscriber. Now you might think, who needs underwear every single month? Who needs new underwear every single month? Well, I know someone who used to work for the late, great Jerry Lewis, and part of his job entailed carrying a suitcase around for Jerry filled with white socks, because Jerry Lewis would put on a pair of white socks in the morning and then throw them out at night. Now, there are many reasons why Jerry Lewis was successful. That may not be one of them, but if you like the thought of never ever having to wash your undies again, there are dozens and dozens of subscription underwear companies you can subscribe to, with names like MeUndies.com, NaughtyKnickers.com, Underwear Nation, MyPackage.com, Sock and Sack, Socks and Undies, Bouteille Bag, My Junk Trunk, and the Curated Underwear Club. Yes, we now live in a world where your underwear can be curated, which means somewhere in the world there is an underwear curator. It's pretty easy to become a member of an underwear subscription club. You get a lot of options when you subscribe to an underwear club. You usually get to choose from 3 categories, which are classic, bold, and adventurous. I was already afraid at bold. And one online company called Skivvy Nicks, no, Skivvy Nicks. Now they give you 3 slightly different categories to choose from, and they are T-bone, tenderloin, and rump roast. Suddenly, adventurous seems so very safe to me. And Skivvy Nicks is so excited about their underwear shipments that there's a countdown timer on their website telling you when the next shipment is going out. By the way, I spotted this email address at the bottom of the MeUndies.com site, which I thought was kind of funny, all things considered. Another company called the Underwear Club has a list of reasons on its website why you should subscribe to their underwear service. And I'd like to point out some interesting wording here. So here's the list. So Number 1 says, every time you get an underwear delivery, you'll experience a dopamine high. Who knew? Number 2 says, a drawer full of new underwear will give you a higher quality of life. Number 3 says, the underwear club will eliminate the need to go to the supermarket to buy new underwear. And I don't know about you, but I have never bought my underwear at a supermarket. They say they will free up your time by, quote, automating your underwear needs. I cannot tell you how much I love that phrase. And then number 5, as you see there, is, with the monthly underwear delivery, you'll live in a total abundance of new, fresh, clean underwear. And who doesn't dream of that? Come on. So why am I talking about underwear subscription services? Well, the worldwide underwear business is worth $110 billion a year. And that's a thong full of money right there. And because the market is so ample, it was ripe for disruption. For years, or let's make it decades, men like me, we bought our underwear from department stores like Walmart and Giant Tiger and Sears. And has anybody seen Sears lately? It began life in Canada as Simpson Sears in 1952. It was once the largest and most successful department store in Canada, today a victim of disruption. Steve Jobs alone, by the way, disrupted 7 industries in his lifetime. Personal computers, animated movies, music, phones, tablet computing, digital publishing, and retail stores. So automating your underwear needs isn't just an amusing online niche. It's a critical aspect of disruption. Everybody needs undies, I think. Underwear is a foundation garment. It is also a foundational category of department stores. Lowly underwear sales keep the lights on in retail stores. When undergarments get disrupted, it's an important moment in the history of retail. It's the canary in the underwear drawer. See, sometimes it's easy to overlook or dismiss disruption in a low-interest category or in boring corners of exciting stores. But disruption is a relentless hunter. It begins in the quietest ways. The founder of Uber didn't want to call a cab on a date. He wanted to press one button on his phone. That's it. He just wanted to impress his date. Uber now has disrupted the taxi industry worldwide and is worth $60 billion. The founders of Airbnb just wanted to rent out air mattresses in their living room to travelers, hence the air in Airbnb. And now it is worth $30 billion and has disrupted the entire hotel industry. See, disruption is like a digital termite. It quietly begins chewing on sleepy legacy industries, and they never see it coming, like hotels and taxis and travel agents and music labels and newspapers and television networks and retail stores. As Clemenza said in The Godfather, sometimes you gotta go to the mattresses every couple of decades because it weeds out the deadwood. And I see some retail stores expanding now, and I think, thy time has come. But look at what disruption has given us. Things like iTunes and iPads and smartphones and podcasts and apps and Airbnb and Uber and Tesla and Netflix. So don't overlook the humble automated underwear club. It's a much bigger disruption than it appears. There's big change stirring in your drawers. And in the end, we need disruption. It's how we progress. It allows us to take magical leaps forward. Life is good. Disruption is good. I look good. Thank you.
Subscription underwear, which brings me to subscriptions. But I'll do that in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking all at once our talkers, Stephen Fell, Jennifer McGrath, Lisa Charlie Boy, Adam Radomski, Mike Flanagan, Huda Idris, Julie S. Lalonde, and Terry O'Reilly. Only at the Walrus Talks will you hear from Mike, hope is not a strategy, And from Huda, hope is a strategy. And Julie, hope is a strategy. I just want to tell you this story about the fax machine in our office. There's one, you know how there's a fax machine that's in your photocopier? It's like in there. One was ringing a few weeks ago, and one of our staff members, who's much younger than me, said, "Oh my God, someone from the 70s is trying to fax us." It was great. So as I mentioned, this is our 84th Walrus Talks. That means there are now more than 600 7-minute talkers on our YouTube channel that you can watch whenever you want, just not on a blue screen in your bedroom after 9 p.m. Okay? Listen up. It's way, you can also go to thewalrus.ca to subscribe, not to underwear, not yet, but to the magazine, but it's way easier to do it tonight. Meet Blair out there at the table. She's going to give you a wonderful $25 for the entire year if you visit Blair and subscribe tonight. It's hard to be Canadian if you don't read The Walrus. That is just true. And we have, yes, we have the healthcare we can rub in our neighbors' faces. We also don't have Ivanka's dad. And we have The Walrus. These things all matter. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss Walrus Talks. We're coming back on November 28th at the Museum of Nature. Just before I'm going to get the audience to do one more thing with me, but before I do that, I'm going to ask our talkers to stand up and go out to the reception in the lobby first so you don't do that weird thing where you trap them. Go, go, go. Where you don't do that weird thing. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, it's stuck? Thank you. Now that's helpful. I want to thank everyone at Concordia, Alan Shepard, who had to run out the door, Philippe Beauregard, Joanne Pelche, and everyone at Concordia and the Concordia alum who are here with us tonight. Also, our national partners, Shaw, Shirk, AMIA, and Aeroplan. Are there any Walrus donors in this room? Don't have to put up your hand if you're embarrassed. I love you. And you should find me at the reception and introduce yourself so I can buy you a drink. Okay? I would like to do that. So please join us at the reception. There is food, there is drink, there is a subscription table, and if you are there, there will be good conversation. It's really helpful to remember that you are actually the walrus, so please do remember that. Thank you for coming. Get some sleep. Safe home. Good night.